Hi, Steve, and hi, everyone. Thank you so much for the introduction, Steve. I'm very excited to be here today with you to go through the product innovation with lean experimentation talk. And hopefully for the next 45 minutes, I can inspire all of you to think about lean experimentation in your work and in your own product. In the meanwhile, if you have any questions at all, please feel free to put it in the chat and we will respond to the questions at the end. Or even if I can see something that is really relevant to the content I'm talking about, I'm more than happy to answer during the talk. Great. Hopefully all of you can see the presentation now. Let's start this talk with a story. I love stories, and I always start my talks with stories. So today I want to talk to you about the story of Amazon Fire Phone that first launched in July 2014. Probably a lot of you here have heard about it or even owned one of them. The idea was Jeff Bezos' idea, who wanted to join the competitive smartphone market. And the trigger for the idea was that their customers used to come to Amazon via iPhones or Android devices. So Amazon didn't really have any sort of control on hardware, which could create problem for them. For example, you cannot buy ebook through Kindle app on your iPhone because Apple takes 30% of app-driven sales. And this cut down could be a really big margin for Amazon. So they decided to build their own phone. And probably as you've heard, like any other products at Amazon, the Fire Phone began on a piece of paper that contained a mock-up of a press release for the product that the company hoped to launch one day. Jeff knew that any Amazon phone would be immediately greeted with one question. Why should anyone buy an Amazon device instead of an iPhone? And that's why he mandates his team. The mandate to his team was very simple and bold from the very beginning. Let's wow our customers with something big and different. Jeff was personally involved in every aspect of the phone creation, and he was so close to the idea that someone from Amazon team called him the super product manager on the Fire Phone. And his guiding principle for Amazon has always been to start with needs and desires of the customers and work backwards. But when it came to Amazon Fire Phone, everything was different. The customer apparently became Jeff Bezos himself. Even one of the Amazon employees mentioned that in essence, we were not building the phone for the customer, we were building it for Jeff. So he prepared a list of all different cool features that can be done for this phone to make it very unique and different. Some of the features such as near phone communication for contactless payments or hands-free interactions to allow users to navigate the interface through mid-air gesture, and a force-sensitive grip that could respond in different ways to various degrees of physical pressure. But perhaps the most compelling and famous feature for this phone was dynamic perspective, which basically uses cameras to track users' head and adjust the display to his or her viewpoint, and making the on-screen image appear like three-dimensional. So he pushed so hard for this particular feature, dynamic perspective, or as they call it, the 3D effects engine. Dynamic perspective at the very beginning presented the team with one main challenge. They needed to create a 3D display that requires no glass and basically is visible from multiple angles. This is a really, really hard challenge, and the key would be facial recognition, which would allow the phone camera to track a user's gaze and adjust the 3D effect accordingly. Many leaders assigned to this project, and they failed to deliver it. Even one team set up a room, and they essentially turned the room to a custom store, filling it with wigs, sunglasses, fake mustaches, and earrings that they put on for the cameras in order to improve facial recognition. Finally, after multiple attempts, a solution was discovered. So they found that they can put 4 cameras on the corner of the phone, which each of them capable of identifying facial features, whether in total darkness or obscured by sunglasses. But guess what? Adding 4 cameras to the phone created a very, very serious battery drain. So after all, the main question was also unanswered, that why dynamic perspective feature? Even team members could not find or imagine any true useful applications for dynamic perspective. And finally, when the Fire Phone went on sale, it didn't take long for the company to discover that consumers considered its smartphone smartphone effort really misguided. Reviewers knocked the device for its silly features, specifically for dynamic perspective, which most found it worthless and distracting. So basically, the feature that took the most amount of time and investment from the whole phone was this dynamic perspective, and it was a failure because no one wants to use it. Amazon Fire Phone was a flop and led to a stack of unsold phones gathering dust in warehouse. And this failure cost Amazon $170 million. This means a big failure, and a lot of money and effort will go to waste. And sadly, this is a very, very common tale we see in many, many projects. Now the question is how to not build a Fire Phone. How can we avoid this situation? How can we be more certain about which idea works, which idea doesn't work? I'm here to share with you some of the techniques and some of the lean techniques to reduce the risk of product failure like this. Hopefully, with whatever background you have here, you can get some ideas about how you can make more informed decisions for your product and reduce the risk by validating your product's idea early and often. So traditional innovation life cycles probably are, specifically the one that Amazon was following, was probably looking something like this. Everything started with an idea. And once the idea is submitted and is captured and is agreed, it goes to an incubation. And the first version of the idea is built, and then all the way down to the scale where the product is scaled to bigger market, more customers, and even more features. So as you can see, this is a very linear and kind of a waterfall process. As you can see, every step goes to the next step without really having a proper feedback loop here. So as you can see, there are a lot of information that can be captured at this point and pass on to the next step, which is missing here. So there is no way here to understand if you're doing the right thing at each stage or not. To change this and make it work, we need to have some changes in order to kind of making sure that at each step we have the confidence that we want to have with our product to go to the next step. So one of the key things that we can look into see how the innovation lifecycle can look like is, first of all, get rid of these arrows. There is no linear way. There is no waterfall way of looking at this. Everything can be looked at as something that it can be evolved, it can be changed, and it can be coming back to the previous step and start again if the information that we have shows that at each stage we are not doing the right thing. And one of the next changes I wanted to make to this innovation lifecycle is to add another step to this, which is called validation. This is probably the most important step in the innovation lifecycle where you can avoid building Amazon Fire Phone, because that's where you have an idea and you make sure you validate your ideas with as much information, with as much data as you can as possible. So when the idea goes beyond validation, you know you have more confidence that your idea will work based on the data that you have. And now you can see all these stages are connecting to each other. There is no linear way. If there is an idea and you go to validation and the validation shows that's not going to work, you don't have to go to the next step. You can always come back, refine, and go back again. So that's the kind of the feedback loop that each of these stages providing to each other. And you might ask, how can we get information from something that we just only know an idea? How do we know? How can we validate each idea by just when we are at the very, very early stage and we don't have much information about it. Today, I want to talk about a technique called lean experimentation, which can help you very quickly and cheaply get some data so that you can make more informed decision about if your idea worth your time and investment to go to the incubation or not. So let's just go through a quick introduction to lean experimentation. So lean experimentation is based on lean foundations. As you know, lean is an approach to get the most value with the least resources available. And the best way to do that is through quick, constant learning cycles. When we say lean experimentation, we also mean a very quick and cheap way to create learning cycles to help us predict if a specific product will deliver its value or not. And also, if it turns out that it won't deliver the value, this method can help us also to find out what could possibly deliver the value. Build, measure, learn, as you can see, is the foundation of, which is the foundation of lean, is also at the heart of lean experimentation. So in the context of lean experimentation, when we say build, we mostly thinking we are basically saying simply creating something for the purpose of progressing with our learning, with the least amount of time and resources available. It can be building anything, and it doesn't need to be a proper full working app. It can be even an idea, designing an idea in the back of a napkin. Measures are simple metrics about the things you build. And learn is always reflecting on what you saw during the measurements. And it's time to analyze the results and decide where do you want to go next. Lean experimentation journey basically has three main steps that are continuously repeated and iterated. The first step is uncovering assumptions. This is the foundation and the most important step in the lean experimentation journey, which we will go over how to uncover assumptions that could possibly kill our product and prioritize which one we want to learn about first. It also involves finding the leanest way and the quickest way to test those assumptions. The second step is about running experiments, which is including running actual experiments and measure the outcome of the experiments. And the last step, or step 3, is about interpreting results and moving on, which is basically where we review the experiment results and we can decide about the option for next, which could be it could be anything. It depends on what we find, including shall we continue, shall we stop? And also that's a step that gives you the confidence in your decision, because now you're making this decision with data that you learn from the experiments that you run. There are a lot of advantages to lean experimentation and how lean experimentation can help. One of the greatest advantages I personally found in using lean experimentation is to help me better understanding of what the assumptions are. You know, most of the time when we have an idea, we are kind of very sure about why we're building a product and what our assumptions are. However, sometimes lean experimentation even challenge that and help us find our true assumptions before we start. I run kind of a lot of exercises for my clients where they clearly know about the assumptions. But when we get in the same room together and we want to talk about the assumptions, capture them and uncover them, they realize how much they are far away from understanding the true assumptions. So this is a really powerful tool to help us think honestly about assumptions. It also gives us confidence to make further decisions. You know, we all know decision making is hard, but we can make it easier when you're backing our decision with data. And lean experimentation can help us with that quick data so that we can make more informed decisions. Also, sometimes it helps us explore the other opportunities that are hidden and you never see them before. But along the journey, while you're running the experiments, you can unleash a lot of kind of like opportunities along the way, so that you can consider those opportunities as well as your current idea. So let's look at what lean experimentation looks like in action. So step 1 as I mentioned, is uncover assumptions. So assumptions are the beliefs that you assume to be true about your product, but you don't have any proof yet. So you don't know if they are true or not. You believe they are true. But we all know if they turn out to be false, your product idea could fail. So it's very crucial. So assumptions are the most important part of any kind of product to consider at the very beginning. Meaning that if the assumptions are false, we cannot continue. Any idea about a desired future state are naturally based on lots of assumptions. This is how our human brain works. Usually when we have an idea, we get so excited. We just want to make it happen without really thinking about why we think this idea will be successful, what assumptions we are making. And those assumptions sometimes turn out to be true and the desired future becomes a reality, which is great. But more often that we would like to admit, those future won't happen. And we ended up being very frustrated and disappointed. In the context of building a product, the truth is that if any of the key hidden assumptions that we have about our product ended up proving false, our product will be in risk of failure. And especially the pain of potential failure would be much larger when the investments is big and as we're asking the whole team to focus on building a product from scratch in case of the innovation. Which we know it can take months or sometimes years. So we don't want to disappoint the team building something that it could not be successful in future. So it's very important to uncover assumptions and be able to validate. Second step is to validate those assumptions. So basically, this step means that now you know your assumptions. For each of them, you can create experiments to validate them. Experiments are kind of very cheap, needs to be very cheap and quick. That's the kind of the lean foundation of part of this, that everything needs to be very cheap and quick and fast. So it can be, depends on the context of your project, depends on the complexity. It can be many things. I've been part of projects which, for example, we only draw a kind of like a wireframe on a paper. We draw a prototype on a paper and we test it with the users very quickly to see if the idea really resonates with the users. We've done a lot of market research to get answers to some of the assumptions that we have. We've done lots of user interviews, which is another powerful experiment to run sometimes to get really honest feedback from your early users. Also, I've been part of projects which has been very, very complex, lots of data analysis, lots of machine learning, which the idea was very big that we didn't know if it's going to be even possible. So we had to create a proof of concept for like a couple of weeks, working on something, building something, even if it's a dirty code, but just building to prove that what we want to achieve is achievable. So all these things here that I mentioned about data analysis, technology spikes, and things like that can help us build that kind of confidence and help us give us a bit more data, a bit more information to be able to answer some of the key questions about our product, about the assumptions. So again, lots of other ways to do this. These are some examples you can see on the page about how you can create experiments. And step 3 is analyze the results and basically decide about what is next. So after you run your experiments, it's time to interpret the results and decide what you should do next. The results, obviously, for qualitative and quantitative experiments look very different and involve different analysis techniques. But as long as you set up your experiment with a very clear, testable assumption and an honest discussion about the criteria for success, the analysis should be relatively simple. Of course, you're never going to be 100% confident in or certain about an assumption, that assumption to be true or false. That's not the goal of this technique. But the goal is to give you enough learning to either increase your confidence to move forward or confront you with the fact that you need to tweak or stop your idea. So basically, this is not about being 100%. You can never be 100% sure. It's just to give you more confidence, just to give you more information to be able to see for yourself what could the next step look like. And to be honest, any of these steps, continue, stop, and pivot, can be a success at this point. If you can understand, if you can have more confidence that you can continue with your product, that's great. Even if you have more confidence that your product doesn't work and you need to stop, it's still a success because you reduce the kind of amount of waste and especially in time and money to go and build something that will not work in future. And pivot is always opening a new window to you. You might find something that is totally hidden. You never knew about it. And now by doing these experiments, you know a new direction that you can pivot to. So basically, innovation lifecycle, as I explained it, looks like this. But for the purpose of talk today, I would like to go into more details and explain to you how can you use lean experimentation in the validation phase. Basically, you can use lean experimentation in any stage of the innovation. But the one that I want to go through more details with you today is the validation phase. So when we talk about validation, we usually talk about some of the kind of key aspects of the product to make sure it's right. So first of all, we want to know if the idea that we have, is it feasible? Can we even build a product like this? Is it viable? How impactful would be the product in solving the problems that the user have? And is it desirable? Do people want to use this product? Do they like it? So all of these three areas needs to be validated for an idea to say this idea worth to go to the next step. And there are some really key questions that we want to ask at this stage of the innovation lifecycle. The questions are, can we technically achieve this? Can we achieve with the current technologies or with the technologies that we have at hand? Can we achieve this solution? Is this idea the right solution to our problem? Sometimes it's really easy to forget about what problems we are trying to solve or what opportunities we are going to target. Sometimes having a very cool idea is not enough. You need to be able to understand what exactly going to happen when we implement this idea. What opportunities are we going to unblock? What problems are we going to solve? And another very key questions and very important question, do people want to use this idea? How people find it? How people find this idea? How do we know people are going to use it in future? Also, is this aligned with our strategy? Is it aligned with our organizational strategy, vision, and objectives? Does it help your organization to achieve its goals? Sometimes we have a really cool idea. Yes, it adds value to the customers, but how much of that value or how much impact does it have on your business? I think that's also another thing that needs to be considered. And the last question, does this value deliver the anticipated, this idea deliver the anticipated value? So all these questions are really important to be answered and validated at this point in the validation phase. So one of the kind of recommendations that I can tell you in order to kind of start your validation journey is to create a canvas, a very simple canvas like this. It has only three areas called ideas description, which you talk about. Basically, you kind of flesh out the details of your idea. And also you talk very clearly about problem or business statements, kind of what opportunities or what problem or business opportunities you can see in here. And also you clearly talk about assumptions. So this is an exercise that might look very simple, but it's very powerful because I highly recommend to do this exercise with your team as well. Involve everyone, try to have discussion about the idea, have a discussion about what assumptions you are making and what sort of kind of opportunities or problems you're targeting. Assumptions can be with any format in this case. It's important that the assumptions to be in a format that can be easily tested and kind of your future learning can be very concrete. But if you found it hard to come up with an assumption, you can try a technique which we call a doomsday futurespective. It's a very kind of interesting exercise, which you start by asking your team, what does success look like? What are your aspirations for your product? Spend some time with your team to kind of talk about this exciting future for your product. And at the end of this step, you should have a very common understanding of what you're shooting for. Now, the next part is to imagine its future and the product launched, and it's a failure. Think about what might have failed. At this stage, you can come up with a list of potential reasons for doomsday or the reasons that your product failed. Now that you know what could possibly be the reasons, you can turn them into assumptions. So, and I'm going to tell you something. Believe me, there is a very powerful truth in this exercise, because your product idea is already more likely to succeed just by talking very honestly about the potential obstacles to its success. So a lot of people might think this is very discouraging. Well, why do we want to talk about failure of our product from now? But I personally found this very, very helpful, that people are thinking very honestly. And also the success, the chances of success for your product is already higher than not having this conversation. So let me tell you a quick examples, just to tell you how I personally have done that in some of the other kind of examples that I had. So we had once one idea to be able to build an app that let people sell and buy homemade food. So it looks really exciting. Yes, you want to be able to build an app. People can buy and sell homemade food, and it can be a kind of a very good and cool app to build, because people can get their hands on really homemade healthy food. And also people who can cook can also have a menu, or have a kind of like a make money. So then we thought about what could be the problems or opportunities that we could target with this. Basically, we've seen an increase in the number of unemployed people who can cook. So we believe this is going to be a really good opportunity for people who they don't have a job, to be able to cook and sell their meals, homemade meals on this app. And this will help with a lot of people in terms of like unemployment. Also, we knew that there's a lack of homemade food for health conscious people. So if you're health conscious, you might not have a lot of options, and you're interested in homemade food, but you don't have time to cook. It's not a lot of options in the market at the moment for you. So there's a big opportunity for us to get involved and build something that people can benefit. So now it's time about thinking about assumptions. So usually that's a step that usually is sometimes missed from a lot of kind of products. People have an idea, it's really cool. Oh, a lot of problems or a lot of kind of opportunities that we can take into consideration. But now this is the powerful part of the exercise, to think about the assumptions. So let's see what assumptions we have here. So let's say our product is launched. I want to practice the doomsday. Let's say our product is launched and it failed. So why? What could be the possible reasons that it failed? Let's say no one is buying homemade food from our app. So all the cooks making food, putting it online, but no one buys. That's going to be a really bad kind of event to happen. Or we don't have cooks that can there is no enough cook to actually sell their meals on the app. So that means we have the demand from people, but we don't have enough cooks to just provide food for the people who wanted to get homemade food. That's going to be also another kind of really, really bad event to happen, and it could definitely fail our product. Another assumption could be possibly we believe our delivery service will be as fast as the competition. So let's imagine if we cannot provide a really good delivery service, that means someone orders a homemade food, cook them as well. Everything is good, but the delivery here will be really bad. So the experience is bad. It takes time. So that's, again, going to be something that can definitely have an impact on our product. So these are top 3 assumptions that we had. We can turn them now into assumptions, these reasons for failure. So assumption here is that we believe people are interested and will buy the homemade food. And we believe cooks will regularly sell dishes. And we believe our delivery service will be as fast as the competition. So these 3 assumptions are our assumptions. There is no proof yet for them that they are true. But if any of them are proven to be false, we will be in trouble. So that's why it's super, super important to be able to, in order to get answer for these assumptions and validate them as soon as possible. As you can see, if even one of them is not true, our app will fail. There are a lot of ways to test them as well. And to be honest, once you have the assumptions that you listed here, each of these assumptions can be a kind of story or a task on their own to be validated. One of the examples are like this. So the first assumption, let's see how can we validate that. We assume people are interested and will buy the homemade food. How can we validate this? Through very quick and easy experiments. So when we talk about experiments, it can be many ways. You can go as creative as you want, as long as you know you will have some kind of valuable learning through your experiments. So I can tell you two things that we've done. For each assumption, you can run multiple experiments to get even more confidence, or you can cover different kind of markets or different potential users in order to have more confidence. It really depends on your time, availability, and how much capacity you have in your team. So let's just tell you what we did for this assumption. So one of the really powerful tools, one of my favorite tools that I can use very quickly to get some of the answers that I want very quickly, is Facebook advertisement. So for this idea, what we did was that we created a landing page. And in the landing page, we talked about the idea. And at the end, it was a button to say, if you're interested, submit your interest. And we set up a Facebook advertisement and we showed the advertisement to the target audience that we had. For example, people who are professional, time constrained between this age and that age, and are based, for example, let's start based in London. And we showed the advertisement to the people, telling them homemade, delicious, nutritious, homemade meals available to you. So then we measured how many people are, from the people who see the ad, how many people clicked on the ad. Because when people click on the ad, they could go to that landing page and they could see about their idea, and they can even kind of say they are interested. So out of that, that was enough to give us some information to say roughly, for example, out of 100 people who saw the ads, how many clicked on the ads. So that means how many people saw this ad and felt like this is something that they're interested in, and they clicked on it. That was one of the ways that, for example, we created a very quick experiment to get some data out. The other way, the experiments shouldn't be always digital. We can also think out of the box about what can we do even in a non-digital way. I remember one of the things that we did was we identified an office. In office that we know, there is a kind of a big information board at the very beginning, very visible to everyone who entered the office. And what we did was that we created these stickers. So as you can see in the kind of right-hand side photo, we talked about the idea, homemade food. We talked also about the kind of a website or a link to that kind of page that I mentioned to you. And we printed it here, and we put this paper in the office. At the end of the day, we went and see how many of these stickers are gone. That was also something that was very quickly telling us, how many people are interested in homemade food, especially to be delivered to their office to them. That was also another great way to give us some ideas about if people are interested in homemade food or not. Again, you can go really creative with creating experiments. And, sometimes some experiments, even they don't work. Sometimes you create an experiment, you design it, create it, you do it, and you realize the information you have is not really enough to tell you it's not enough to tell you what's the next step. And I think that's the step you can define another experiment, or maybe we can test it in a different ways. The important thing is to keep trying, finding cheap and easy ways to test this. Anything that can give you any ideas, any more information, any more confidence, that would be considered as a really good experiment. And if I want to tell you how the journey looks like visual, it always looks like this. You uncover the assumptions, you define the hypothesis or use cases that you really want to test. You design the experiments, depends on what experiment is. This experiment can be very different. And then you go into kind of some kind of validation, which it can take sometimes even multiple sprints for an assumption to be true. It really depends on the context that you're working on. I've been working on recently on it with a team that we wanted to use image processing for, in order to kind of predict some events in one of the kind of like fields. And that was a huge amount of work. So it was a really big database of all the images. We had to do kind of like machine learning algorithm to see if we can do it or not. So we designed a 4-sprint kind of proof of concept, which during this, we went through kind of uncovering assumptions, designing experiments, going through multiple sprints of even kind of validating the assumptions, and continue until we have an answer. And as you can see, this loop is going back, always uncover an assumption, design experiments, and come back and validate. And we do this until we get to a point which we have information in order to say, in order to say what can be next thing. Sometimes we have enough information for an idea after 1 or 2 sprints or after 1 or 2 experiments to say, yes, this is an idea that is ready to go to incubation. That means it provides value, it's desirable, it's viable, and it's feasible. Sometimes also we have enough information to tell us, no, this idea won't work. We should stop it here. And that's very, very kind of important part of this journey, to make sure we always have confidence. And if we don't, stop it at that point. And also pivot to a new idea also is very common, and can be really powerful thing to get out of these sprints of validation. Sometimes you learn something that you never knew before, but now you're doing it even through very quick and easy experiments. You still can see which area you can pivot to. And also pivoting to a new idea is very common, even in very famous products. I can tell you one major example, which is Instagram. As you know, Instagram started as a location-based social network called Bourbon, which also had an option for photo. Basically, what happened with Bourbon was that you can check into any location and you could add a photo to your location when you check in. However, halfway through development, the initial data showed that users were more kind of flocking to one side of the app, and that was the photos and filters. So the founders decided that they would pivot the idea from location sharing to photo sharing, and Instagram is what it is now. So a lot of other examples exist that pivot to a new direction, help the kind of product to be even more and more successful. So that's also a really great outcome if you can find you can find the things that you didn't know before, but throughout the journey you find, and you can pivot now to that new direction. So basically, this is the innovation life cycle. You can, as I mentioned to you at the beginning, you can use lean experimentation in basically any stage of the product, innovation product. So innovation is all about bringing a new product to life. So at any of these stages, you always have stuff and things that you can validate. When you have an idea, you can validate if the idea is going to be what you want to do in future, if it's going to have to deliver the value. Even when you are in incubation, you want to make sure you are building the right product for the customers. And there are a lot of assumptions that you make, even when you're building your actual product, which can be really helpful to use lean experimentation in order to validate those assumptions and making sure you are on the right path. Even when you want to scale your product, still you want to add a lot of new features. You might want to even add a new kind of technology to be able to use a new technology in order to scale your product. So again, a lot of assumptions. So my point here is that at any of these stages, you have a lot of assumptions. Obviously, lean experimentation is one of the ways to validate assumptions. There are a lot of other ways. The point and the key is to always validate your assumptions. You never go ahead just with having some assumptions in mind. Always validate them so that you have more confidence in your product and in the success of your product. And as I said, innovation is about bringing new product to life. It's very normal to not know much about the product, and you have to find a way to know more, to be more confident. I always and definitely recommend that regardless of what stage of your product innovation you are, always uncover assumptions and experiment to understand their validity and choose carefully about the next step. So you always have confidence in your next move. I started this talk with a story, and I would like to finish this talk with a quick story as well. Again, another story from Amazon. A successful story this time. I think I owe this to Amazon after the Fire Phone story. The story is about Amazon Echo, which a lot of you might own or know about it. An intelligent voice-controlled household appliance that could play music, read the news, and even order groceries for you, all by simply letting the users talk to them from anywhere in the house. So the same as Amazon Fire Phone, Jeff Bezos was a huge supporter of Echo idea from the very beginning. However, unlike Amazon Fire Phone, this time, instead of going directly to build the idea, they took extra steps to validate Echo idea first by uncovering assumptions. So when Echo idea came around, there were two main assumptions that could potentially lead to product failure if they turn out to be false. One of them was if the idea is technically feasible. And the second one is if we are able to create a smooth and natural conversational experience for the users, do they want to use our product? Are they interested in our product? For the tech feasibility, the main concern was about the latency, the time that it takes for Alexa, which you know the name of the virtual assistant, to respond to any queries. And the assumption that the team was at that point was that that latency will be less than 1 second. So it needs to be 1 second to please the users and look natural. But that was only an assumption. So the team knew that they had to validate this assumption, because if the assumption is not true, if it's more than 1 second, then the product will fail. At that point of time, the average latency of voice recognition technology the team had at that point was about 2.5 to 3 seconds, which is not good. So the team had to really validate if they can achieve 1 second for Echo. The team did thousands of internal tests, analysis, and of the data and the voice until they validated that they can achieve the latency of 1.5 seconds, which means the idea was technically feasible. So the first validation of the first assumption is validated. To validate the conversational experience assumption, the team knew in order to succeed, Echo and its virtual assistant, Alexa, need to be very responsive and conversational. It has to feel like you're talking to a human being so that the people are pleased and are happy to use it. But the question was, if you want to build this really kind of like human being conversational feature, it can take a long time and it's very challenging and it's a really, really complex feature. But if you build this, how do we know that people are going to use it? How can we validate if this is something that people are interested? And that if you're providing this experience, can we make this idea desirable and viable for the users? So to validate this assumption, the team performed an experiment called Wizard of Oz, which is a method of testing a method that doesn't exist yet. The test involved a human wizard sitting in a separate room, responding real time to any voice query the human testing subject would make to Echo, often without even telling the testers in advance. For example, if the subject asked Echo, what's the weather like in New York? The wizards in the other room would quickly type and send out the answers through Echo voice. So basically, there was no system built in. It was a human being sitting in another room, just typing the answers. The point was, it was mostly a psychology lean experiment to figure out if this makes people excited to use it in future. If we build this feature, is this what people are excited to use? And at the end, the early data showed people are really excited to use Echo this way, and they gathered enough data from the experiments to support their next course of action. Obviously, there has been a lot of other experiments that they had to run in order to validate, but this was only a small kind of example to show how experimentation worked for Alexa and made it successful. And all those validation helped the team to build Amazon Echo to be one of the biggest hits in Amazon hardware history. Even on the first year of being released, it's been kind of met with high demand and constantly ranking the Amazon bestseller, number one seller. So basically, this was a story to tell you how lean experimentation helped companies to be more confident in their product and build successful products. If you're interested to do more further kind of readings, I have a couple of books here which I highly recommend in order to get more information about how lean and lean approach can help you and your team and your product to make more informed decisions. The first book is called Lean Experimentation in Action, which I personally, I'm the co-author of that book with one of my colleagues, Kylie Castella. And it's just basically giving you more details about how you can use lean experimentation in your team. Lean Startup is the kind of my to-go book, always to learn about lean. Running Lean is another great book. Lean Enterprise is another great book, but by one of my good friends, Barry O'Reilly, which is talking about how you can infuse lean into your enterprise as well. I really hope you enjoy your talk. Thank you so much for listening to me. And I am more than happy to answer any questions that you guys have. You bang on time.
Okay, fantastic. Well, thank you very much, Maryam. I really enjoyed that. I had a little bit of exposure, and I was excited to see you've got a book in Amazon. So yeah, that's fantastic. We do have a couple questions.
Sure.
So we're going to start off with the first one is, how do you know if the experiment is feasible?
Very good question, and I think the feasibility is one of the areas that we definitely want to test, and lean experimentation can help a lot. Maybe I can tell you an example. I've been working with one of my clients, and they wanted to use kind of image processing to understand if they can correct the orders in the kitchen when the kitchens are creating. For example, let's say you are going to you are ordering a takeaway. Sometimes the orders are not really right, so they come either wrong or in a different kind of order. So there are a lot of waste usually at the end of the day in each kitchen. So the idea was that if we kind of put some kind of cameras in the kitchen, and they can capture all those kind of pictures, and then kind of through the image processing and machine learning, we can help telling the people who are packing if this is a right order or not. But we didn't know if this is possible. This is a really, really interesting idea, but we didn't know if it's possible because there are a lot of questions about feasibility. Even, is there a camera that can give us this accurate, for example, picture? That was one of the kind of key things that we had to check the feasibility. So again, a lean experiment here helped us. We had to buy 4 different cameras from different kind of companies that can give us different sort of image that we can take as an input for our kind of AI engine and machine learning. Okay. Again, this is one of the examples I can say feasibility is something that you can start getting by doing the experiments, and you can define your experiments, and the goal of your experiments you can set with the feasibility, and that's how you can get your questions about feasibility answered.
Okay, great. Thank you very much. The second question is, who is involved in creating assumptions and how are they selected?
So basically, I would always encourage the team who is going to work on the idea to be involved in also thinking about assumptions. I personally big fan of collaboration and also visibility, transparency. So obviously, if you only ask kind of Jeff Bezos, what's your assumptions? He would come up with just assumptions that he had. Whereas if you ask him and multiple other people in the same room about talking honestly about assumptions, then it would be really healthy debate about what could be the right assumption, what could not, what could be the assumption that we believe is not and is not. So I personally say everyone who is involved in building the product kind of, or involved at each stage needs to be involved. And obviously, the selection or criteria, the prioritization criteria is about which assumption is more likely to be true, or which assumption is less likely to be true. So that means which of the assumptions we have less confident to be true. And that means that assumption can really hurt us if it's proven to be false. And that's how I would say we should prioritize and select them. But it's a team effort.
Okay, great. Thank you. And the last question is, are user research experts included as part of the lean experiment process?
I would say lean experiment process can be for anyone. It doesn't need to be product. It doesn't need to be developers. It doesn't need to be QAs. It can be anyone. But
Mhm.
obviously, when it comes to designing experiments, sometimes people with background of product and user research can help a lot with
Mhm.
designing some of the experiments, especially when you want to draw some prototypes or put together prototypes, put together user research. Obviously, having those experts in the team will definitely help. But I would say it's not the process for specific people. It's for everyone in a team. Regardless of your role and your capabilities, you should be able to think about assumptions related to your work, even if you're a developer. When you're
Mhm.
writing a code, you're making an assumption. It's just it's a mindset for you to think
Right.
about those assumptions and see how you can validate it.
Okay, fantastic. Well, again, I really enjoyed this myself, and I'm sure all the other attendees did. And thank you very much for an
Thank you
awesome
so much.
job.
Thank you,
Okay,
everyone. Thank you.
okay.